where transfers equal 50 and taxes equal 150. I don't have any units up here. You can make up whatever units you want because it doesn't really matter for how we solve the problem. So we can simplify. We can take those three pieces of information up there and we can simplify. Consumption is 100 plus 0.9 parentheses times YD. Well, YD is income Y plus transfers, which in this case are 50, minus taxes, which in this case are 150. So consumption equals 100 plus 0.9 open parentheses Y plus 50 minus 150. Let me do some simplifying. Consumption equals 100 plus, you can distribute your 0.9 now. I don't like to do that. I like to simplify what's in the parentheses first. So I like to say plus 0.9 income minus 100. Addition and subtraction tend to be easier for most of us than multiplication. Now I'm going to distribute the 0.9. Consumption equals 100 plus 0.9 times income minus 0.9 times 100. And now I'm going to simplify and combine terms. Consumption equals the 100 minus the 90, or just 10, plus 0.9 times income. So we've taken all those three pieces of information I typed up there and we simplified it into one equation where consumption depends upon income. Let's add to that information about investment. Let's suppose investment equals 100. And to make life easy, let's suppose that government exports and imports are all equal to 0. To find equilibrium, we do the same thing. Output equals aggregate demand, where aggregate demand is C plus I plus G plus exports minus imports. So we're going to solve for output and income, that's the Y on the left, and it equals consumption, so we're just going to rewrite our consumption function. 10 plus 0.9Y is consumption, plus investment was given as 100, plus government is 0, plus exports is 0, minus imports is 0. Simplify. Y equals 10 plus 100 is 110, plus 0.9Y. We find when you do this on exams, and you will be having to do this on the midterm on November 19th, that if you try to do too many steps at once, you're more likely to make an arithmetic error. So it's much better to simplify and then start doing algebra than to simplify and do the algebra all in one step. Subtract the 0.9Y from both sides of the equation. On the left, I've got 0.1Y. On the right, I've got 110. Divide both sides left and right by 0.1. I've got income equals 1100. And then if this was a question on a problem set or a blue and gold or a section exercise or an exam, some units would have been specified and you want to add the units there. So if the units had been, say, $1,100 billion per month, then you just add the units back on. It's the same process. It's just starting from C plus I plus G plus exports minus imports. Any questions? Nick's my spotter. We're good? Awesome. All right. When we defined equilibrium, we said equilibrium was output equals aggregate demand. Notice there's nothing in that definition of equilibrium that says anything about unemployment or employment. That means that we can have what's called an unemployment equilibrium, and this is the big idea of Keynesian economics. This is the big idea, is that the economy can be in equilibrium, so we're going to say output equals the equilibrium level of output. But there's an unemployment problem because the amount of output in equilibrium is less than the full employment amount of output. So for instance, let's draw a pretty little graph. Aggregate demand on the vertical, Y on the horizontal. Throw some aggregate demand line on there, label it AD. And then to find equilibrium, we're going to put our 45-degree line up here. 45-degree line. That's a line where every point on that line is a possible equilibrium. The actual macro equilibrium is the point where the aggregate demand line crosses the 45-degree line. That's what we're calling YE for equilibrium amount of output. We say there's an unemployment equilibrium if that amount of output is less than the amount of output that would be required to produce full employment. Because businesses respond to aggregate demand, that's it. We're just stuck there. As long as there's no change in aggregate demand, if aggregate demand is 2,000 billion a month, then firms are going to produce 2,000 billion a month of output, even if it would take, say, $2,500 billion a month of output to fully employ the labor force. We're in equilibrium. Output equals aggregate demand, but that equilibrium has us inside of the production possibilities frontier. That equilibrium has an unemployment problem because it's not enough GDP to fully employ the labor force. To fully employ the labor force, we have to be producing an amount of output that's that YFE. Really important. Really important concept. Good? Good. All right. So one more piece before we start playing with consumption. Remember that services dominate the amount of goods that are produced in the economy. This is the graph I showed you last week or the week before. 1950 to 2014, the rise in services is a share of total output, the fall in goods. So after World War II, about 50% of what we produced was goods, another 10% was structures, and now nearly 2/3 of what we produce are services. So what that means is, and this is the reader article I think for today or next time, I forget when it is. So work that I'm doing with the co-author Aaron Pacitti looks at the effect of being a service economy. The argument that we make is that because only goods can be produced ahead of demand, that if we think about an economy that's at the trough, at the worst point of the business cycle, so things have been really awful and things are starting to turn around. If businesses are optimistic that the economy will recover soon, the goods producers can produce more goods now in anticipation of demand. So we're at the trough, things have been terrible, but it's March of 1933, there's a new president who's been inaugurated, and everybody's optimistic things are going to improve, or the same thing happened in January 2009, and people got optimistic that things are going to improve. The goods producers can respond to that optimism by producing more goods in anticipation of demand. And the service producers can't. You cannot, the goods producers, they think, oh, happy times are right around the corner, I'm going to start selling a whole lot more copies of, what was that, 50 Shades of Grey? Wasn't that book that everybody's keen on? I'm going to start selling a whole lot more copies of 50 Shades of Grey because people are going to spend like mad on Christmas. I'm going to produce all of those books now in anticipation of demand. Sweet. The dentist says, oh, things are going to turn around soon, and sooner or later I can stop playing Candy Crush because people are going to come back and want their teeth cleaned. But there's nothing the dentist can do now to start cleaning teeth before you're actually in the dentist chair. So with goods, once that optimism returns, the goods producers can start producing in anticipation of increased demand, but the service producers are kind of stuck. Which means that as the economy moves towards producing more and more services and fewer goods, we're going to have slower recoveries. Because the service producers, the dentists, the lawyers, and all those folks, they have to wait for the actual increase in demand to happen. If we have a goods-based economy, the optimism on the part of the goods producers means they start producing more, and when they produce more, they need more people, and those people have more income, and when people have more income, they tend to go shopping, and they buy more, and it's supply, we say supply creates its own demand. That production leads to increased employment, which leads to increased income, which leads to people buying the goods that were produced. And it's this wonderful little, oh, everything's wonderful and happy, and the economy's going to get better, look, we made it happen. But if we're producing only services, all the optimism in the world isn't going to lead to more employment, and so we're just stuck. So we're at a point now where about 2/3 of what we're producing are services, and our recoveries are taking longer and longer and longer. This difference between the effect of goods and services is not part of what you read in any textbook, but it's an important part of understanding why the recoveries in the United States have gotten slower and slower and slower. All right, so let's look at the consumption part, because consumption was a key part of that story. Consumption is the big component of aggregate demand. Remember, consumption is like 70% or so of aggregate demand. Consumption is spending by households, and by the way, nonprofit organizations, but that's just a little trivia. Households and nonprofit organizations spending for final goods and services. That's consumption spending, we already knew that. Saving is any use of disposable income other than consumption. We calculate it this way: saving equals disposable income minus consumption. If in the aggregate for the economy as a whole, if the amount of saving is less than zero, we say the economy is dis-saving, strange little word. And if for the economy as a whole, the total amount of saving is positive, we say that the economy is saving or there is saving. You almost never hear that word saving. It's just one of these language things that's out there to know. People can save in the traditional ways. So saving does include, traditional ways of saving that you might think of if I was down there and could call for hands. Putting money in a piggy bank, putting money in a savings account, buying stocks and bonds. That's the traditional forms of saving. Saving also includes paying off debt, and that's important. So if you accumulate, say, student debt, just to give an example, if you take out student loans and you pay those back in 2032, the paying back of those loans in 2032, which is a long time from now, is not part of your consumption spending because I'm employed right now to teach you. I'm not going to be teaching you still in 2032. Love you as much as I do. I'm not going to be teaching you 16, 18 years from now. And so that spending is recorded when you incur the debt. And when you pay off the debt sometime in the future, that's not consumption because there's no current employment right then. And so we count it as part of saving. So saving is disposable income minus consumption. And then we talk about the saving rate, which is the total amount of saving divided by disposable income. If you look at a picture of the saving rate, I'll rewrite that equation on the top here. If we look at the picture of the saving rate, which is again saving over disposable income, that's what we see from 1950 to the present. So we had this period here from the early 1970s until about 2007 when the saving rate was just on this downward trend. So we had a saving rate around 10, 12% in the 50s and the 60s, and then it just went and declined down to about 2% by 2006. Now, this saving rate is the aggregate. It's looking not just at one person's behavior, it's looking at the behavior for the economy as a whole. So we've got a variety of behaviors that are caught in that picture. We've got some people who are saving. They're putting money in stocks and bonds or savings accounts. We've got some people who are saving off debt, paying off debt. We've got some people who are dissaving personally because they're taking out debt. There's a whole lot of different things that are going on. But in the aggregate, what we had was this decline in personal saving from the early 1970s until about 2006. I'm going to skip this next quick question. Skip that one. All right. So let's think about consumption spending. What would you do? Suppose that your paycheck goes up by $200 a month. What would you do? Would you spend all $200? Would you spend between $125 and $175 and pay off debt with the rest of it? Would you spend $50 to $100 and save or pay off debt with the rest of it? Would you spend $0 to $50 and save or pay off debt with the rest of it? Or would you save or pay off debt with all $200? So everybody answer how you would do it. There's not a right answer here. It's just a question of what would you do? Suppose your paycheck goes up by $200 a month. What would you do? A, B, C, D, or E? 3 seconds. Oh, one more sip of coffee. 1, 2, 3. Cool. All right. So let me write here what the answers were. So we had 4% on A, 12% on B, 42%, 32%, and 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take and figure out what's the weighted on average, what would you do? So I'm going to take, and I'm going to say it out loud while I do it. I'm going to multiply 0.04 by 200, and 0.12 times the middle there, 150, oops, 150, plus 0.42 times 75, plus 0.32 times 25, plus 10 times 0. And the average, the weighted average of what you would do is you would spend $65.50. So if you look at what's your behavior on average for the class as a whole, you would spend $65.50 out of that additional $200. Notice that doesn't mean that everybody in the room would spend $65.50. Some of you are spending all $200. Some of you are using it all to pay off debt or to save. But the aggregate effect, the aggregate effect of the economy as a whole is an increase in spending of $65.50. Now, here's another question. Suppose you get this extra $200 per month in your paycheck. Would your answer to the previous question, so your decision about how to spend it or save it, would it depend upon why your check went up? If it was due to a raise versus due to a tax cut? So A is I'd spend more if it was a raise. B is I'd spend more if it had been a tax cut. And C was it wouldn't matter to me. An extra $200 is an extra $200. So would your answer to the first question have changed if I had told you it was a raise versus a tax cut? A, B, C, please don't do D or E. 3 seconds. 1, 2, 3. So what do we have? We've got 42% of you would spend more if it was a raise, 11% would spend more if it was a tax cut, and 46% would spend more if it was, 46% would spend the same no matter what. When economists look at the relationship between consumption and disposable income, economists assume that on average, for the economy as a whole, the answer is it doesn't matter, that money is money. What you've said here is that's a bad assumption. What you've said is, yeah, for about half of us, it doesn't matter, money is money. But there's 4 times as many of us for whom it matters if it's a raise versus a tax cut. And so we're going to follow what economists tend to do and assume that the response to a change in disposable income is like point C there, the same, no matter whether it's a raise or a tax cut. But you guys just demonstrated that's not necessarily a good assumption. Right? So we're going to make that assumption, but we may want, if we were actually doing macroeconomics for the Federal Reserve Board, we want to think about what effect it would have to make this distinction. All right, so what is it that we've said? We've said that consumption depends upon disposable income, and an increase in disposable income, that's the $200 per month, leads to an increase in consumption spending. And in fact, for you guys, you found that the change in consumption was $65.50 when the change in disposable income was $200. Or I could put it this way, the change in consumption divided by the change in disposable income. That's going to tell me what percentage of that increase in income you're going to spend, and it's 32.75%. So you're going to spend 32.75% of any change in disposable income, and that's what we see generally, is that an increase in disposable income increases consumption. Flip it over, a decrease in disposable income leads to a decrease in consumption, and that's a big determinant of consumption spending. Here's another one. Clicker question. Suppose you own a house, and suppose the value of your house increases from $200,000 to $750,000. What would you do? Would you increase your spending and save less? Would you keep your spending the same, or would you decrease your spending and save more? What would you do if the value of your house increases? Nothing's happened to your income. It's just the value of your house is now $750 versus $200. 3 seconds, please. 1,001, 1,002, 1,003, and stop. All right. So 20% of you would increase your spending. 69% would keep it the same. 10% would decrease your spending. You've shown what tends to be true for the economy as a whole. Most of you keep your spending the same, but twice as many of you, 20 versus 10, twice as many of you would increase your spending if there was an increase in your wealth. And that's what we tend to see, that an increase in wealth tends to lead to an increase in consumption spending. A decrease in wealth tends to lead to a decrease in consumption spending. But it's a pretty small effect. Right? 70% of you said it's not going to make any difference. So there is a wealth effect. More wealth does lead to more spending, but it tends to be pretty small, just the way that you showed that. All right, here's another one. Suppose that interest rates that you pay to borrow money were to increase. What would you do? Would you borrow more and increase your spending? Would you borrow the same amount and keep your spending the same? Would you borrow less and decrease your spending? So the amount that you're having to pay to borrow money increases. What would you do? A, B, or C? No D's or E's, please. 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. So here we've got 3% would borrow more, 10% it wouldn't have any effect, 85% of you would borrow less. That tends, what you said here in C, tends to be the case for the economy as a whole. It doesn't, when I say for the economy as a whole, it doesn't mean that everybody responds in part C. Some people increase their spending, some people keep it the same, but on average for the economy as a whole, there's going to be a decrease in total spending if you're a borrower. But suppose instead, suppose that most of your income is the interest on your savings, and interest rates that you earn on saved money increase. Now, let me give you some numerical examples here. Suppose you're one of these lucky people who has $1 million in the bank. But suppose you have it in a savings account at the Bank of America, which right now is paying 0.01%. That means that each year you're receiving $100 in interest income. Whoop-de-doo. Suppose you take that same $1 million and you save it at 5%, which is the interest rates that were common a decade or so ago. That means that each year you have $50,000 in interest income. So suppose that most of your income is the interest that you earn on your savings, and interest rates go up. If interest rates increase, 0.01 to 5. If interest rates increase, what are you going to do? You're going to increase your spending, B, keep your spending the same, or C, decrease your spending. A, B, or C, please. 3 seconds. 1, 2, and 3. Interesting. So we got 36% are going to increase, 31% are going to keep it the same, 32% you all reverse are going to decrease your spending. What tends to be the case is if your income is based on your interest, then you have $50,000 in income per year, you're going to spend more than if you had only $100 in income per year. The implication of that is that for interest rates, because borrowers and those people who are living off their savings have opposite reactions to a change in interest rates, then an increase in interest rates, we don't know what effect that's going to have on consumption spending. It might make consumption spending go up, might make it go down. It depends upon whether the people living off savings dominate. Y'all have a great day, and hopefully I'll see you on the front on Wednesday.